This was kibbutz Be'eri, an agricultural community in the Negev desert. The kibbutz was established in 1946 and had more than 1,000 residents in 2021. It had a printing company, a gallery, a boutique dairy store, and a hydroponics agriculture company. It was a beautiful green oasis in the desert, where families lived and worked and played. Until October 7, 2023, Black Shabbat, the destruction of kibbutz Be'eri at the hands of Hamas. Terrorists broke through the border, invaded the kibbutz, and murdered more than 120 people who lived or worked there. They shot, stabbed, burned, and mutilated men, women, children, and elderly people. The victims were Jews, Bedouins, Thai and Filipino foreign workers, as well as Palestinian field workers. Kibbutz Be'eri is now a blackened, evacuated ruin. In addition to the 120 murdered, 26 people were kidnapped from Be'eri. This story is about Eli and Yossi Sharabi, two brothers who lived in kibbutz Be'eri with their families. Eli and Yossi are the two eldest of 4 siblings who were born and grew up in kibbutz Be'eri. Eli, the eldest, married a British woman from Bristol called Leanne. Leanne came to Israel as a kibbutz volunteer at age 19. That's when she met Eli Sharabi and decided to stay. I feel connected to her because that's my story too. I came to Israel as a volunteer, fell in love with a man and a kibbutz, and stayed. There are many of us all over Israel, non-Jews, who stayed and built a life in these beautiful places called kibbutzim. Leanne and Eli had 2 daughters together. They were called Noya and Yahel. They were 16 and 13 years old. The family often traveled to the UK to see Leanne's parents and brother. Yossi, the second brother, married Nira Herman, who worked as a nurse. They had 3 beautiful daughters together, Yuval, 17, Ophir, 14, and Oren, 13. They lived their lives, went to work and school, saw family and friends, like all people everywhere. Yuval had a boyfriend called Ophir Engel, who was from kibbutz Ramat Rachel. The teenagers were very much in love and spent as much time together as they could. On October 7, 2023, Ophir Engel was staying with Yuval. Both families barricaded themselves into their safe rooms. Everyone in the kibbutz tried to hide in shelters and closets. They had no way to defend themselves, only the security guards had guns. The kibbutz was practically defenseless against the heavily armed terrorists who went from house to house and hunted people down, leaving a trail of murder, fire, and destruction. Eli and Leanne's house was on the list too. When the intruders broke in, their dog, Mocha, ran at them barking. The gunman shot the dog immediately, and Mocha stayed there, lying on the floor, a fallen defender of his home and his family. In interviews, Nira later said that Leanne texted her, saying, "Nira, I can hear them. They are here at our house. They are shooting and shouting, 'Die Israel, please call for help.'" Nira did call for help, but it wouldn't come until hours later. It was too late for Leanne, Noya, and Yahel. They were murdered in such a brutal way that it took weeks for their remains to be identified. I don't know the details of what was done to them, and I prefer not to know. But Noya and Yahel, young teenage girls, could only be identified through DNA testing. Eli Sharabi lost his entire family on that horrific morning. But we don't know whether he realizes they are dead. He was abducted by Hamas, and there has been no contact with him whatsoever. We don't know if he is alive at all, or if he will ever come home. But even if he does, he has no home anymore, no house, no kibbutz, no family. His entire life has been destroyed by the Death Eaters. I can't imagine anything worse. Lian, Yahel, and Noya were buried without the presence of their beloved husband and father. Lian's family from the UK also couldn't attend, as there were no flights going in and out of Israel. I have never witnessed something so heartbreaking. Yossi, Nira, the three girls, and Ophir Engel were also hiding in their safe room. They could hear the terrorists outside, shouting and shooting. People started calling Nira, who is a nurse, with panicked requests for help, what to do for family members who had been shot. Nira tried to instruct them as well as she could without being able to leave her house and see the wounded people for herself. Lian texted her, begging her to call for help. 10 minutes later, she lost contact with Lian. Nira's nephew called from the Supernova Music Festival, telling her they were under attack and he was coming to their kibbutz. Nira had to tell them not to come, that the terrorists were in Be'eri too. Later, she heard that her nephew was killed at the site of Supernova. To these people, it must have felt like the world was ending. The terror and despair they must have felt is unimaginable. At 12:30, the Death Eaters reached Nira and Yossi's house. They did the same thing as in Eli and Lian's home. They shot and killed their dog, Shoko, who tried to defend his family. Yossi then got up, walked out of the safe room and told the terrorists to take him and leave his family. In the documentary Burning in the Hearts of Be'eri, Nira later described the following scene. They took us from the house and they brought us downstairs to the garden. They took our phones with their weapons aimed at us. All three terrorists. They were dressed in black with the whole package and everything. And they took pictures, a selfie, to spread it all around. And they just took the flag. We had a flag of Israel down in the house, and they just ripped it and they started to smash it. And they start to yell in Arabic, "Down with Israel, this is Palestine, this is not Israel. Israel does not exist. Kill all the Jews." The terrorists then told them to give them their car keys. They made Yossi Sharabi and Ophir Engel get into the car, together with Amit Shani, their neighbor's son. Then they drove away with the three Israelis as hostages. Nira and her daughters and their neighbor, Amit's mother, stood there and cried, looking after the car that took their loved ones away. 7 weeks later, in the ceasefire, Ophir and Amit were released because they were minors. The video footage of the reunion of Ophir and Yuval is incredibly touching. Amit's grandmother, Simcha Shani, was shot in the stomach but survived the ordeal. Both boys are extremely lucky to be alive and to see their families again. Unlike the Sharabi family, not only were Lian, Noya and Yahel murdered, but both Eli and Yossi were kept in Gaza. Nira and her daughters cannot return to Be'eri. Their house has been burned to the ground. They stay in a hotel in Eilat and try to survive the hours, days, weeks and months that they are homeless and fatherless. Nira says she has no idea why the terrorists didn't simply shoot them all. They had no problems shooting other women and children. Yossi and Eli's younger brother, Sharon, supports them the best he can and campaigns for the release of his brothers. He keeps Shabbat, and so he didn't get any of the messages that his family sent him that day until the evening when he switched on his phone and saw what had happened to them. He says, "My job is to bring my brothers home." But in January of 2024, the family had to endure more shattering news. Hamas released a video on January 14 showing 3 hostages, Noah Argamani, Yossi Sharabi, and Itai Sversky. They were forced to say that if Israel didn't stop the war, they would die. Hamas ended the video with a fun little game. We got to guess who was going to be murdered that night. Sadly, Noah was the only one who survived this demonic game. Both Itai Sversky and Yossi Sharabi were killed that day. I'm heartbroken for Nira and her daughters. This family had to go through way too much. This leaves Eli Sharabi still in captivity, as far as we know. We don't know if he is alive or if he will ever come home, but what he will find when he does will be the end of his world. I don't know how anyone could survive so much pain and loss. I don't know how we can support him, but we will try. We are with you, Eli, all of us, always.